Ah, Dr. Hatch Salmon, a name whispered in hushed tones on the hallowed greens of every golf course from St Andrews to Augusta. Not for his skill, mind you. No, Dr. Salmon wasn't known for elegant swings or pinpoint putts. Dr. Salmon was a different breed of golfer entirely, a force of nature disguised in tweed. A man whose approach to this noble game could only be described as enthusiastic, explosively so. You see, Dr. Salmon, for all his academic achievements, possessed a temperament as volatile as a jar of nitroglycerin balanced atop a freshly shaken bottle of champagne. And when it came to golf, this volatile nature had a tendency to, shall we say, manifest itself in rather spectacular fashion. Our story takes us to the rolling hills of the prestigious insert name of a posh golf course, Golf Club, a championship course famed for its challenging layout and even more challenging clientele. The air crackled with anticipation, a strange mix of trepidation and morbid curiosity. Word had gotten around that Dr. Salmon was gracing the course with his presence, and everyone, from the seasoned veterans to the wide-eyed caddies, braced themselves for the inevitable spectacle. The man himself stood on the first tee, a picture of deceptively serene concentration. His tweed cap was pulled low over his brow, his jaw set in a grim line. He took a deep breath, savouring the silence before the storm. Little did anyone know, this was to be no ordinary round of golf. This, my friends, was to be the stuff of legends. The day Dr. Hatch Salmon cemented his place in golfing history with the most disastrous, the most chaotic, the most utterly unbelievable 18 holes ever played. With a grunt that could curdle milk, Dr. Salmon took his swing. The club connected, not with the satisfying thwack of a well-struck ball, but a sickening crunch of metal meeting, well, something other than a golf ball. The gallery winced. His ball, meanwhile, veered wildly off course, a rogue comet of white arcing towards the unsuspecting spectators huddled by the trees. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the crowd, quickly stifled as the gravity of the situation became clear. Dr. Salmon, you see, did not take kindly to laughter at his expense. With a roar that would have made a Viking warrior proud, he charged towards the source of the amusement, brandishing his club like a weapon. The laughter died in the spectator's throat as the good doctor bore down on him. Fortunately for the spectator, Dr. Salmon's aim was as atrocious off the tee as it was on it. He missed his target by a country mile, his club connecting instead with the gnarled trunk of an ancient oak. The sound of splintering wood echoed across the stunned silence that followed. If Dr. Salmon had been prone to introspection, which he most certainly was not, he might have taken the events of the first hole as a sign that perhaps this wasn't his day. That perhaps a nice cup of tea and a lie down were in order. But Dr. Salmon was not a man to be deterred, least of all by a little thing like divine intervention. The second hole saw him wrestling his club from a sand trap, the iron twisted beyond recognition, his face a mask of frustrated rage. The third hole, a seemingly straightforward putt, ended with his putter meeting an untimely demise against the unforgiving green. "Blasted contraption!" he roared, hurling the mangled remains of his putter towards the flagside. The crowd, now significantly thinned out, watched with a mixture of amusement and apprehension. This was turning out to be even more entertaining than they had anticipated. The fourth hole was a water hazard, a challenge that Dr. Salmon met with characteristic gusto, or more accurately, with the reckless abandon of a man possessed. His drive landed with a pathetic plop in the middle of the pond, prompting a string of curses that would make a sailor blush. Undeterred, he commandeered his golf cart, a sturdy beast of a machine that had seen its fair share of abuse, and charged headlong into the water. The result was predictable, if somewhat spectacular. The cart, bogged down in the mud, came to an abrupt halt, sending Dr. Salmon sprawling into the murky depths. He emerged, spluttering and covered in pondweed like a creature from the Black Lagoon. His round, much like his outfit, was now beyond salvation, yet he pressed on, driven by a force that defied logic and reason. Holes 5 and 6 passed in a blur of mistimed swings, mangled clubs, and increasingly creative profanity. By the time he reached the 7th tee, Dr. Salmon resembled a shipwreck survivor, his clothing torn, his face a mask of grim determination. The 7th hole, at insert name of a posh golf course, was a treacherous par 3, a sliver of green guarded by a yawning bunker and the watchful gaze of the clubhouse bar. Most golfers approached it with a healthy dose of trepidation. Dr. Salmon, predictably, approached it with a battle cry and a swing that would have felled a redwood. The result was both familiar and disheartening. Another cloud of sand, another club sacrificed to the golfing gods. This time, however, the club didn't just bend or splinter, it snapped clean in two, the shaft spinning off into the rough like a discarded javelin. Right then, Dr. Salmon declared to no one in particular, time for a stroll, and with that, he marched off into the bunker, his trusty putter the only weapon left in his rapidly dwindling arsenal. The gallery watched in stunned silence as he hacked at the sand, his frustration growing with each failed attempt. The sand, it seemed, had become his nemesis, a tangible representation of his golfing demons. Holes 8 and 9 blurred into a symphony of misplaced aggression and increasingly desperate attempts at recovery. The 8th hole saw Dr. Salmon's ball disappear into the woods, never to be seen again. Undeterred, he charged into the undergrowth, hacking at branches and bushes with his putter, his roars of frustration echoing through the trees. A group of birdwatchers, enjoying a peaceful afternoon amongst the foliage, beat a hasty retreat as Dr. Salmon emerged from the undergrowth, looking like a deranged druid who had just declared war on nature itself. Hole 9 brought little respite. His drive, a wild hook that defied the laws of physics, landed on the green of the neighbouring fairway. "Well, that's just rude," he exclaimed, before storming off in pursuit of his errant ball, leaving a trail of bewildered spectators in his wake. By the time he reached the 10th tee, a sense of weary resignation had settled over the gallery. Dr. Salmon, however, remained undeterred. His spirit, much like his scorecard, seemed impervious to the crushing weight of reality. The 10th hole was a long par 5, a test of patience and strategy for even the most seasoned golfer. Dr. Salmon, however, had long abandoned any pretense of strategy. His approach was one of brute force, a relentless assault on both the course and his dwindling supply of clubs. The 11th hole found him once again wrestling with the watery grave of the water hazard, this time resorting to desperate measures. "If the ball won't come to me," he muttered, "then I shall come to the ball." He then proceeded to drop to his hands and knees and attempt to drink the pond dry. The 12th hole saw him lost in the woods again, this time engaging in a heated debate with a squirrel over the rules of golf. The squirrel wisely declined to comment. Emerging from the woods, Dr. Salmon looked like he had been through a war zone. His clothes were torn and tattered, and his face bore the marks of countless branches and twigs that had lashed out at him as he fought his way through the dense underbrush. The forest had not been kind to him, and it showed in every step he took. His once pristine golf attire was now a patchwork of dirt, leaves, and what appeared to be squirrel fur. It was as if nature itself had conspired against him, throwing every obstacle in his path to prevent him from reaching the next hole. His clothes were torn and covered in a suspicious amount of leaves and squirrel fur, making him look more like a wild man than a golfer. The forest had left its mark on him, and he wore it like a badge of honor. Each step he took was a testament to his determination to conquer the course, no matter what obstacles lay in his path. The leaves clung to him like a second skin, and the squirrel fur added an almost comical touch to his disheveled appearance. But Dr. Salmon was not one to be deterred by such trivialities. He had a game to play, and nothing was going to stop him. Dr. Salmon looked less like a golfer and more like a man who had just lost a wrestling match with a particularly aggressive hedge. His hair was dishevelled, and his face bore the scratches and bruises of his encounter with the forest. But despite his bedraggled appearance, there was a fire in his eyes that burned brighter than ever. He was a man on a mission, and nothing was going to stand in his way. The forest may have tried to defeat him, but Dr. Salmon was not one to give up easily. He had come too far to turn back now, but the fire in his eyes, fueled by equal parts frustration and sugary lemonade from the halfway house, burned brighter than ever. The lemonade had given him a much-needed boost of energy, and the frustration of his earlier struggles had only served to strengthen his resolve. He was determined to conquer the course, no matter what it took. The halfway house had provided a brief respite, but now it was time to get back to the game. Dr. Salmon took a deep breath and squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Hole 13 saw him face the water hazard once again, a familiar foe that had bested him many times before. The water glistened in the sunlight, taunting him with its calm surface. But Dr. Salmon was not one to be intimidated by a mere water hazard. He had faced far greater challenges in his life, and he was determined to conquer this one as well. He took a deep breath and approached the water with a newfound sense of determination. This time, he would not be defeated, this time with a newfound thirst for vengeance. The water hazard had bested him before, but Dr. Salmon was not one to give up easily. He had learned from his past mistakes, and he was ready to take on the challenge once again. He approached the water with a steely determination, his eyes fixed on the target. This time he would not let the water get the best of him. He was ready to face the challenge head-on, and he was determined to come out victorious. "You haven't seen the last of me, you watery fiend," he declared, his voice filled with determination. The water hazard may have bested him before, but Dr. Salmon was not one to back down from a challenge. He was ready to take on the water with everything he had. He squared his shoulders and took a deep breath, ready to face the challenge head-on. This time, he would not be defeated. He was determined to conquer the water hazard and prove to himself that he could overcome any obstacle. He bellowed, brandishing his 9 iron like Excalibur. The club felt like an extension of his arm, and he wielded it with the confidence of a knight going into battle. The water hazard stood before him, a formidable foe, but Dr. Salmon was ready to take it on. He took a deep breath and focused on the target, his mind clear and his resolve unwavering. This time, he would not be defeated. He was ready to conquer the water hazard and prove to himself that he could overcome any obstacle. His attempt to smite the water, however, ended with a resounding splash and a fresh wave of curses. The ball landed in the water with a loud splash, and Dr. Salmon's frustration reached new heights. He had been so sure that this time he would succeed. But once again, the water hazard had bested him. He let out a string of curses, his anger and frustration boiling over. But even in the face of defeat, Dr. Salmon was not one to give up. He took a deep breath and squared his shoulders, ready to face the next challenge. By the 14th hole, even the caddies had taken to hiding behind the refreshment cart whenever Dr. Salmon approached. They had seen his frustration and knew better than to get in his way. The refreshment cart provided a safe haven from the storm of emotions that seemed to follow Dr. Salmon wherever he went. The caddies watched from a distance, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. They had never seen anyone so determined to conquer the course, and they couldn't help but root for him, even from the safety of their hiding place. His latest predicament, another, you guessed it, sand trap, seemed to push him to his absolute limit. The sand trap was a familiar foe, one that had bested him many times before, but Dr. Salmon was not one to back down from a challenge. He stood at the edge of the trap, his eyes fixed on the target, his mind focused on the task at hand. The sand may have been unyielding, but Dr. Salmon was determined to conquer it. He took a deep breath and prepared to take his shot, his resolve unwavering. "This infernal sand!" he raged, kicking furiously at the unyielding grains. The sand trap had bested him once again, and his frustration reached new heights. He kicked at the sand, his anger boiling over, but even in the face of defeat, Dr. Salmon was not one to give up. He took a deep breath and squared his shoulders, ready to face the next challenge. The sand may have been unyielding, but Dr. Salmon was determined to conquer it. He was ready to take on the course with everything he had. I'll set fire to you," he declared, his voice filled with determination. The sand trap may have bested him, but Dr. Salmon was not one to back down from a challenge. He was ready to take on the sand with everything he had. He squared his shoulders and took a deep breath, ready to face the challenge head-on. This time, he would not be defeated. He was determined to conquer the sand trap and prove to himself that he could overcome any obstacle. And with the air of a man about to perform a magic trick, he produced a cigarette lighter from his pocket and flicked it on. The flame danced in the air, a symbol of his determination and resolve. Dr. Salmon was ready to take on the course with everything he had. He took a deep breath and focused on the task at hand, his mind clear and his resolve unwavering. This time he would not be defeated. He was ready to conquer the course and prove to himself that he could overcome any obstacle. The lighter's flame flickered in the breeze, a small but powerful symbol of Dr. Salmon's determination. He was ready to take on the course with everything he had. He took a deep breath and focused on the task at hand, his mind clear and his resolve unwavering. This time he would not be defeated. He was ready to conquer the course and prove to himself that he could overcome any obstacle. The flame danced in the air, a beacon of hope and determination. Dr. Salmon was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, and he was determined to come out victorious. The sand, as you might imagine, remained wholly unimpressed by Dr. Salmon's pyrotechnic aspirations. The lighter, however, met a much more tragic end, disappearing into the depths of the sand trap with a pathetic plink. "Curse you, sand!" Dr. Salmon shrieked, shaking his fist at the sky. "You are my eternal nemesis!" It was a sentiment most golfers who had the misfortune of playing behind him that day were inclined to agree with. Holes 15 and 16 passed in a blur of broken clubs, misplaced balls, and increasingly creative insults hurled at anything that moved, or in the case of the sand traps, stubbornly refused to move. His scorecard by this point resembled a particularly harrowing episode of Cops, filled with tales of assault, battery, and one very unfortunate incident involving a hot dog vendor and a misplaced 9-iron. As Dr. Salmon stood on the 17th tee, a strange calm seemed to settle over him. Whether it was the exhaustion, the setting sun, or the fact that he was running dangerously low on both golf clubs and expletives, no one could say. But this newfound tranquility was short-lived. His drive, a truly impressive feat of misdirection, veered sharply to the right, soaring over the heads of the terrified spectators and landing with a bone-jarring thud on the roof of the clubhouse. The 18th hole was less a golf game and more a desperate cry for help. His final shot, a wild windmill swing that would have made a drunken pirate proud, sent his last remaining club arcing through the air, narrowly missing the head of the club president, before disappearing into the lake with a splash. And with that, Dr. Hatch Salmon's legendary round of golf came to an end. Silence descended upon the 18th hole, broken only by the gentle lapping of the lake water against the bank. The spectators, those who had dared to remain, stared in stunned silence at the spot where Dr. Salmon's club had met its watery demise. The final tally of Dr. Salmon's game was not for the faint of heart. His scorecard, a tattered testament to his unique brand of golfing mayhem, told a tale of unprecedented disaster. 257 strokes. 12 broken clubs, 7 spectators requiring medical attention and likely years of therapy. 4 golf carts written off as insurance write-offs, much to the chagrin of the club manager who had unwisely agreed to rent one to Dr. Salmon. And 1 very singed sand trap, forever bearing the mark of the good doctor's fiery temper. News of Dr. Salmon's achievement spread through the golfing world like wildfire. Carried on the whispers of awestruck and slightly terrified golfers, his name became synonymous with golfing ineptitude, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones to wide-eyed novices. But there was a strange sort of respect, a grudging admiration that accompanied the legend of Dr. Hatch Salmon. For in his absolute, unadulterated chaos, he had achieved something truly remarkable. He had taken a game known for its precision, its decorum, its almost stifling sense of order, and turned it on its head. He had reminded everyone in the most spectacularly disastrous way possible that golf at its heart was just a game. And sometimes the greatest joy comes not from winning, but from embracing the glorious, unpredictable, utterly chaotic journey. And so the next time you find yourself on the golf course, your swing betraying you, your scorecard a testament to your struggles, remember Dr. Hatch Salmon. Remember his indomitable spirit, his boundless enthusiasm, and his unwavering commitment to turning a simple round of golf into a spectacle.